Legends, what is going on? I hope you are doing well. Now, I am just about to go through and record a full breakdown of Ironman Wales and also Ironman 70.3 Staffordshire. Now, I thought give a little bit of an intro to this. So, there's a few reasons why I'm filming this actually. One, because it's quite good to give a few guys an insight who feel like they want to, take on their own challenge or they want to go down the route of potentially even trying to do their own Ironman. Probably going to be quite a raw video. I'm going to put some edits in, but overall, it's going to be quite simply me just going for a rundown of the last year, really. So, in case you don't know, for some reason you've landed on this video by random, I am Alex Gribben. I am a former Royal Marines Commando, was in the military from 2014 to 2019, then 2019 until pretty much present day, have been involved in the fitness industry, whether that's as a personal trainer, as an online business, like online coach, or on top of that as well, now running an online business that specifically helps PTs and online coaches scale their own business. Now, I also wanted to go into this video, and a really good point that Drew Shaw made, and my friend Drew, I'm just going to say Drew, is the fact that I'll probably want to watch this video back one day, or I want to show my kids this one day at some point. So the whole point of this video is to talk about Staffordshire, which is a 70.3 Ironman, and also Ironman Wales, which is this is 2023. I completed both of these. So I'm going to go for it. As I say, it's going to be quite raw. It's going to be literally just me, just generally having a little bit of a chat about it, and kind of overviewing it. I'm not going to proclaim to be any sort of like guru when it comes to triathlons or events. I would say that like people like Joe Skipper is actually a guy I've been following for quite a while. If you want like really good, proper advice on it, then I would probably advise going and watching those guys' page. If you want a little bit of a raw insight of just what it's been like to take on these types of challenges this year, then obviously give the rest of this video a watch. I'll try and put some good edits and try and make it a little bit entertaining, but it's going to be literally like a self-proclaimed podcast and a bit of just a journal for myself, really, to be totally honest. It comes to the kind of first point, really, which is like why I decided to do any form of Ironman event or any form of like big event in general, really. So I'll try not to cry in this video, but I can't really guarantee it. But anyway, long story short, my granddad, Dennis Osmond, really proud Welsh guy, passed away in 2021, 2022. Off the top of my head, I think it was 2022. I'll have to reference that. But unfortunately, he passed away of cancer at the ripe old age of 89, almost hit 90. Really inspirational bloke in my life. It just was an absolute legend. He was in the RAF for a long period. I'll actually reference that in a minute. Some really key points in both races that I'll talk about that were quite strong to me that kind of spurred me on even more. But he also then, and I can talk about this now because it has been released in books, was also had a career in MI5. Very, very interesting guy. And as I say, when he passed away, it was kind of a huge shock for me personally because it was like, that's one of my heroes. That's the first member of my family to pass away. And I kind of wanted to do something to commemorate the passing of him, but also showcase that, the inspirational journey that he had in his careers and all the things that he had done in acting and various other achievements. I kind of wanted to do my own and I wanted to achieve something else. And I left the military obviously in 2019, and I think there's a massive identity crisis. And I'm sure any other, previous serving soldiers can kind of relate to that ability of you leave the military and it's like, right, what's next? I've done some really big things in business. I've hit some massive milestones across that period. 6 figures, 5-figure months, whatever, it's just finances. But one of the biggest things I really felt like I'd lost and I've really regained this year, and I'm also continuing to carry that on, was obviously the physical element of like pushing yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and kind of going through that. And I'm going to cover that quite a bit here. So what I'll kind of reference first is the place I was in before going into this Ironman. So this picture here is a picture of me and Drew. We're actually when Drew, one of my good friends, just launched his gym. You can see by my like puffy cheeks, obviously I'm not too different right now, but like I was pretty overweight in this picture, a little bit uninspired. My training frequency was just fucking all over the place. I wasn't really doing anything, wasn't really training anything. And it was kind of like, oh, right, well, here we are. This is, granddad's just passed away. What do you want to do now? What's the next kind of aim you're going for, really? And I wasn't in a great place physically, mentally, or emotionally, or inspirationally, really. And it was kind of like, well, what's the next thing to do? So my triathlon experience prior to this was one sprint triathlon that I did off the cuff pretty much in 2019. That was, I think it was like a 750 swim in a lake, what was it, like a 20K cycle and a 5K run. So it's not anything sort of, to write home about. But me and Drew, really, really good friend of mine, triathlete himself, has done half Ironmans. He's actually on the pursuit now of doing a full, which is awesome to see, and it's pretty cool. I don't know if I'll admit it, but I'm hoping I've played a little bit of part in that and being like, look, you can do this. It'll be a lot quicker than me. But anyway, on that point. So, we kind of devised that as an idea. I was like, right, I know I want to do one. I actually reached out to Omnia, which is James, absolutely fantastic coach that I've had throughout this whole process, and sort of said, like, look, at the time I was working with him, I think we were aiming for something along the lines of like a half marathon or something quite low key like that was what we were kind of aiming for. And I sort of said, look, I want to set myself a big challenge. I'm looking to do an Ironman next year. It was 2022 at the time. As that picture sort of shows, that's where I was at. And it was like, right, what do we want to do? What do we want to go and sort of push? So it was like, right, the ones that you could do would be, I think it was Bolton, which was quite early on in the year. And it was like, I don't know if that's going to give you enough time to prep or enough time to really be in a good position to do it. And then it was Wales. And I was like, well, linking a few things together. My granddad, obviously Dennis, incredibly, really proud Welshman. And then obviously Wales Ironman was like, the stars aligned really. It was like, yeah, that would be an amazing thing to do. I didn't know at the time. I was signed up to Wales, and I'll put a picture somewhere up here of actually, I'll get it up on my phone here. But the day that I actually decided I was going to log it, so I was like, "Yep, we bought the ticket, paid whatever it is, £600 to sign up to the race." And then it was only after that I realised that Wales is actually probably, I think it is, don't quote me on this, one of the top 5 or top 3 hardest Ironmans in the world to do, based upon the elevation for the hills, and we'll come on that obviously later on in the story. But also just the way that it's kind of laid out, it's a bit different to most Ironmans. It's like a little bit more intense, really. But we'll come to that in a second anyway, which is quite cool. So yeah, we begun the journey. We were like, right, we signed up to do this. That was the first one. I hadn't at the time signed up to Staffordshire and was like, we're going to go and get on with it. What does that involve? What do you do? So anyone who doesn't know, a full distance Ironman is a 2.4K swim. A work in kilometers, and Drills takes the piss out of this. I think that's based upon from the military, they work in Ks. So like a 2.4K swim, a 180K bike ride, and a 42K run, otherwise known as a marathon at the end. I say run, and we'll come on to that point in a minute. It's survive, not necessarily a run. Anyway, we started that journey, and a really, really funny thing about the start of this journey, and it's very me. I couldn't swim front crawl. So a year ago, like more than a year ago, literally could not swim front crawl. Like I had no real idea how the actual movements worked. I couldn't really breathe in terms of like on one side. So it was, or both sides, sorry. I would do it, but I was very slow, and it wasn't great. So a lot of my like early swims were me just doing breaststroke. So the first thing I decided to do when I decided like, right, you're going to actually do this, was number 1, sign up to get swimming lessons. So I live in Gloucester, which is near Cheltenham, that sort of area. And Nuffield is one of the near gyms to me. So at the time, Abby, great instructor, went and actually signed up to like 12 weeks, I think, initially of swimming lessons, of the idea of like, right, hopefully we should be able to get this, and then I'll be able to do it by myself. I think I actually ended up doing like 24 weeks with the techniques and stuff they were doing, more from the realization of just wanting to really understand, how to properly nail it and develop it a bit more. Over that time, I've got some really good, like, we'll go through some of the swims in a minute, but some really good times actually in the pool, and also actually on Staffordshire, and actually eventually on Wales was a really good swim. So it's pretty mad, actually, the space of like not being able to swim front crawl, and then a full 12 months later being like, yep, you can fully swim front crawl in Ironman distance races, which is obviously pretty awesome. So that was one of the first things I did, was like, right, I need to learn to swim properly. Let's go to one of the swim lessons. So we sort of started those. But on top of that, one of the things I didn't actually have at the time was a proper bike. I actually had, really funny story. Again, fuck it, we'll go with this. This is probably going to be like a 45-minute podcast. I had one of my bikes stolen in 2020 that I did the sprint triathlon on. So I didn't have a proper bike, didn't have a proper like thing to actually cycle on. So I was like, right, I've signed up to this Ironman. I can't swim and I haven't got a bike, so it's a good start, isn't it? And actually, the things before, I could barely really. I wasn't in a great running condition. We did do back in 2020, me and Drew, really good friend again, like he's been a massive part of playing this, a ultra marathon, but then kind of since that, a year and a half later, hadn't really done anything, major like that. So running condition was in a great position. So it's actually really funny to think about. I signed up to an Ironman, paid 600 quid, could barely run or wasn't in great running condition, couldn't swim and didn't have a bike. So that's always a good start, isn't it? But yeah, I went down to Evans Cycles, bought myself a bike. I opted for a Trek road bike, which I'll show you a picture of here on the first cycle I ended up doing. I'm hoping these pop up and I don't end up with nothing on the screen, but this is like one of the first cycles I did that were big, so it's a 60k cycle. But a Trek road bike, nothing fancy. I think it cost me, I think it was meant to be around 1,500 quid and then been about 1,000. I kind of wanted to do this race without spending hundreds of thousands of pounds. I think I probably spent overall, realistically, within the 8 to maybe £10,000 across the whole year, and that's including everything. That's bike fitting, that's races, that's the bike, that's the nutrition wise, that's the coaching that I was getting from James, across the whole year. Anyway, so £1,000 was what we spent on the bike. Helmet, all the cleats, everything went in there, and that was kind of the right. So we can learn how to swim. We've got a bike, and I'm naturally not too bad at running, so that's kind of where we're at. First cycle I did was a 60k cycle. So that was one of the things that we sort of went for. Really slow pace, just eased into it. What I ended up doing, which I would definitely advise, and this is probably a tip I would do, if you're going to go for a race like this, I would highly suggest like learning your local routes. So my parents actually lived back in Oxfordshire and Witney, and a lot of my early on training, like in the early parts of this year, was based around like going home, cycling with my father, who's obviously Brendan Gribben, and I'll come into that in a minute, about like some of the inspirations from that side as well. And learning the routes around there. So there was a good 20k loop, and there was also a good 40k loop, which actually goes past Clarkson's farm, which is obviously Jeremy Clarkson. So it's quite funny because there were some key points in that which were quite interesting. So yeah, one piece of advice, or the first tip I would give you is, if you're not great at swimming lessons, if you're not great at swimming, get swimming lessons. Get yourself some form of a bike that isn't going to completely fall apart in 2 minutes, and you can get some good tires fitted. But also number 3, I would say, is definitely learn the routes of where you're going to go. So whether that's locally or if you're going to travel somewhere to do the routes, get yourself something that's like a guaranteed and easily built route that you can repeat each time. And the reason I would say that is because potentially when you do some of these cycles, if you're trying to do a 40, 80, 100k cycle, one of the last things you want to be doing is obviously, one, get lost, but 2, be in this really awkward position where you don't know if you've got the distance from what you're trying to achieve. So we had like 2 routes that I was doing at home, and then I'll come on to I say at home in Witney, and then some routes that we did back here, which I'll come on to in a second. 40 and a 20k loop. So I think early on what I was doing is laps. So I would do like a 20k loop, took about an hour, and then I would just do that 3 times, which would be like 3 hours worth of cycling. And then eventually it was like 40, and then we had some bigger ones that we had that were like 80. That was sort of like a key point. Now, another thing to sort of lean into this is one of my really good friends, Scott Booth. He did Ironman Wales back, I believe, in 2019. And he was actually at one of my events. So I'll bring up the picture here of what it looked like. So one of our events, I still run and still maintain this business, as well as obviously the stuff that we're doing with Supercharge. But Scott Booth talked at this event, and he actually talked about his experience with Ironman Wales. And one of the funniest things he always said to me was about the idea of there are jellyfish there. I'll come on to that when I start talking about the actual event later on. They're like, watch out for the jellyfish, because they're literally just going to be in the middle of the sea, and you'll kind of be out there cruising around or like swimming around, and you'll just see random jellyfish, which is really, really funny. So that was all the way back at the very start of the year. That was kind of early on learning to swim, and also on top of that, obviously getting the bike sorted, getting some good routes in, and then actually when we had the event, speaking to Scott about his kind of experiences of how he'd got on with it. So that's quite interesting. Now, one of the first things we did, now I'll put a video somewhere on the screen at some point now, was me and my dad would do a lot of the routes together. And it was just a case of like going home, 2 days worth of a weekend, either do a long ride by myself or a short ride with my dad, and then go into a run. So like into the brick sessions, which obviously if you're going to train for this type of event, you need to be able to do that. You need to be able to come off the bike and be able to maintain some form of running pace, or actually be able to understand that your muscles obviously change from that process. So early on, it was literally just a lot of testing the waters, seeing how we were getting on, cycling with my dad, which is great fun. And then also on top of that, obviously being able to just short runs off the bike. So anywhere between like 5 to 10 to, later on, it was obviously like half marathons off the back of the bike. But yeah, really enjoyable at the very start. One of the biggest things that I really wanted to do as well is back in 2019, when I was training for my sprint distance triathlon, I really enjoyed the idea of just going home, spending an hour and a half on the bike with my dad, which is absolutely brilliant. And obviously when my granddad passed away, it was a sudden realization for me that, my dad isn't going to be here forever. So it was quite interesting to obviously go home every weekend and just cycle with my dad, which was great fun. So what he would basically do, and I would advise probably if you are going to train for one of these events, getting a few people that could help you do this as well, whether it's your friends, your family, your partner. He would do the first hour of a bike ride with me, so the first 20K, or sometimes the first 2 hours of a bike ride when we got later on into like the 6-7 hour bike rides that we were doing later on. He would do the first sort of 20K with me, make sure I was all right, and then I'd go off and do the rest. And it just kind of breaks it up mentally, which was a huge part of it, really, which was absolutely brilliant. So I would definitely advise, if you are going to do this, I would get a few people that you can bounce off for a 12-month period before you decide to do the event. I mean, depending on your level of fitness, I would personally recommend 6 to 12 months is going to be a good time for you to be able to prep for, whether that's a 70.3 or whether that's a full distance or whether that is a marathon or anything down that route is going to be in there. So early on, that was kind of what we were doing. We were like, right, this is what we're going to do. We're into these sort of brick sessions. Again, as I said at the time, I hadn't yet signed to Staffordshire. It was kind of just low key going into that route. Now, another training partner, which I'll put a picture up of this somewhere, was Becca, absolute legend. What we used to do, as I said, is, at start, I was very much going back home and doing all my rides with my dad. But what we started to do is find really local routes that I could then do during the week. So the training split that James would have me on was conditioning sessions in the gym. I'll put a picture up somewhere here of me doing some squats or a video or something like that. So it'd be like conditioning the sessions for the legs. And then what I would do is watt bike sessions. And then on top of that, I would also do short distance cycles and brick sessions in the week. And then longer distance cycles / longer distance runs or brick sessions during the weekend. And they were normally done at home. But what we found near us, and I'll show you this picture on the screen as well somewhere, which is me in my fluorescent jacket, which shows you how inexperienced or how little kit I had at the very start of this journey. This was back in February. We found a place called Holy Gelato. Now, this is near to us in Gloucester. So if you are in this place, I'd say it's a great ride. From Holy Gelato, you can do around a 40 to 60, maybe even if you pushed it 80K loop, which is absolutely brilliant because you can imagine, you know where your starting point is. There's a car park. You can cycle out of the car park, do 40 to 60 to 80Ks worth of cycling, and then come back in and you're in that good position. But that's kind of what we discovered. I think the first one we did was like a 20K loop around that area, which actually Becca was doing a lot with me, which was absolutely brilliant. And then it would obviously progress more and more on, which was fantastic. What I found as you got more and more into the training and you got used to the volume, or you got used to the style of like, right, I know I'll be in the gym at this time, I'll be in that, it becomes a lot easier. And actually suddenly, and it sounds really ridiculous, but it's only really talking about it now and looking back at it that you realize is that an hour on a watt bike seems like a lot to start off with, but eventually an hour on a watt bike is really short. Like it just goes like that. So I would say if you're early on in this and you're thinking, oh my God, I can barely run a 5K, or I'm doing this or I'm doing that, like it does become more manageable and easier the more you keep doing it. So that's one thing I would say. Now, what we then started to do is I started to do short testing loops. So on my own. So one of the first things I actually did, and let me just double check it. I think off the top of my head, I did basically a sprint triathlon, but in the gym. That was one of the first things I did where we were sort of trying to bring things all together. And that, looking back, would have been back in February. So I think off the top of my head, I did a 1.9K swim, I believe, and then a 90K on the bike, 45K on the bike, I think off the top of my head, into a 5K run. So that was kind of or it might have been a K in the pool, 45K on a watt bike, and then a 5K on a treadmill. So I think that was what I did first, if you were to say try, as in all 3 points together. That was kind of the first thing I actually did this year, to be like, right, where are we at for that kind of thing? And that was, I don't think it was any ridiculous time. I think it was quite just generally quite slow, but it was literally just a case to see if we could pin those all together. So that was one of the first things I did to kind of just see where I was at. I would recommend, if you're going to do anything like this, whatever event you want to achieve and do, even if that's a 70.3 or full distance Ironman or a sprint triathlon, whatever you're going to decide to do, I would definitely try to do as many shorter events, not hundreds, but at least maybe 3 or 4 before you go in for the actual race. If the first race is the one that you're going to do, the unfortunate reality is there will be a lot of mistakes you make. There'll also be a lot of things that you would want to adjust for the next time you do it. And then the reality being of that is it would then be quite difficult. So even doing that really short one in the gym, there's a lot of things that I was like, right, you need to be able to, your shoes, I actually changed them at the time. because they weren't great if you were trying to transition, and they weren't great for a lot of different things on that area. The fueling strategies as well, like, maybe to begin with, I wasn't really fueling on the bike, I wasn't really doing anything. But then when you start to do these little pocket of races, you then go, actually, can I have gels? Can I have flapjacks? What kind of works slightly better? Now, that was one of the first ones I did, was a really short one in the gym, nothing too ridiculous, nothing too crazy. Now, what I'll then do, I think, looking more into March, so I think it was going more towards maybe March the 5th or 6th, or going a little bit further down here. March 18th, actually, this says, I then did my first half Ironman, but self-run. So when I say self-run, it's not an official event. As I say, I did quite a few triathlons, mini ones, before then doing the main one, really, just to, the experience gap is there. I haven't done it before. So March, looking at the scores indoors here, it was a self-run one. So we went down to the pool, I think it's 6 a.m. We went down into the pool, and that was locally, actually, in Whitney. So as I say, my dad was helping do that. And I did a 45-minute 1.9K swim. So that was, as I say, after 3 months worth of swimming lessons, that was kind of where I'd gone from, maybe only being able to swim drift boat. Every Tuesday I was getting in the pool, doing swimming lessons or practicing the swimming routines. And then by March, I was actually in a position to be able to actually properly swim at speed with distance as well. So 45 minutes, 1.9K, and then went straight home, literally got changed, and then went into a 90K ride straight off the back of that. So obviously that's what triathlons are. You go from one event to the next. And I did a 3:45 around Charbury and Whitney and Chipping Norton and all that place for 90K. I'll put the picture up somewhere here because it will sort of showcase that. And then straight off the back of that, I think I had a tiny break, maybe even like 5 minutes, literally just to sort bottles out, sort everything out around there. And then went into a 21K run, which I did in 2 hours and 25 minutes at the time back then. So that was what we basically did for that, so that I could self-run it, was I did the swim, my mum and dad drove me home, got straight onto the bike, had the bike and everything set up, did the cycle, did 2 45K loops, and in between those loops, my dad basically just checked I'm all right. And then from there, went straight into the run, where we knew a 21K loop, so what my dad did was actually cycle alongside me, just make sure that I was, safe, I was all right, I wasn't, delirious, and then did that. Looking back at that one, like, and just looking at this picture, I felt quite good after that. I didn't feel like ridiculous. I didn't feel absolutely dead. I was like, okay, this doesn't feel too bad at this point. Like, it feels okay. And that sort of starts to build your confidence about what you're obviously aiming to achieve with a full distance Ironman, because it is fucking terrifying, I'll tell you that, quite naturally. So that's kind of what happened, towards March, really, was we were up to that point. And that was obviously sort of leading into, what was going to be the next things to come. I think also what I wanted to do is, prior to signing up to any official event, which was a 70.3, which is a half of the distance of an Ironman, I wanted to kind of make sure that I could actually cover that distance in some way. So we did that as the first one. Now, I believe off the back of doing that, I then signed up to do Staffordshire. Now, Staffordshire's really flat course, and I'll come on to that in a minute, of why maybe if you're going to do Wales, you want to get some hill training in first. But anyway, did it really short. It's a really flat course, and it's a half distance Ironman, which is 70.3, based down in Staffordshire. So that was then the idea of like, right, well, we know that we can do it in a pool. We know we can do it in the conditions that are kind of like your own self-led. Let's now go and see what it looks like if we do it in, actual race conditions for the day. So that was kind of leading into that point of like, right, we're going to sign up to this and then go have a go at it. Now, what I'll then put into some videos or pictures, and maybe somewhere here, is the fact that the difference between swimming in a pool versus open water swimming is massively different. Like there's a huge disparity between a lot of people training in a pool, and then when you come from the sea or from a lake, it's incredibly different to you actually swimming, in proper race conditions. One, in a wetsuit, you get this like weird like clip that comes right up to the top of here, which is quite awkward to deal with. What I did was actually put some like jelly, what do you call it, like Vaseline jelly along here, because it helps that sort of like looser. But anyway, there's a few things that you need to kind of make sure to adjust. So what we end up doing, I'll put some clips or videos of here of me and, as I say again, good friend Drew went and started to do like open water swims. Now, I think we actually only did like 2 or 3 before I then did my first official event, which was Staffordshire. But even just doing those alongside with the swimming lessons, alongside with anything else, all of that kind of coupled in did massively benefit the day of Staffordshire, but it also benefited just like Wales having to be able to like train in, the ability to be in a wetsuit, the ability to actually be in open water, because it's a little bit more terrifying than just grabbing the side of the pool, and also just, the ability to, adjust the cold water, swim with a hat on, goggles, all that sort of stuff. So that was quite good fun. Now, what we then did before Staffordshire, this was way before we went into that actual event, and I would highly recommend, if you're going to go and do Wales, or you're going to go and do any of these types of events, to do this. Me and Becca decided to go and stay down in Tenby, which is where Wales Ironman is, and basically just look at and check out the routes and just get a feel of what the day was going to be like. One of the last things you want to do is obviously be somewhere unfamiliar when you're about to do something quite arduous. So we literally just booked like a week down there. I'll put some pictures up of us doing some cycles together, but also me with, at the time, borrowed wetsuit off Scott, who I mentioned earlier, going down and doing the literally just jumping into the sea and just looking at what the conditions would be like and kind of getting a rough feel for it. It was quite funny actually, because the swim on the day was 10 times better than the swim that I did, whatever this video is here, because it was grim. It was absolutely freezing, and the waves were like disgusting, whereas on the day it was actually a lot better conditions. But anyway, that kind of helped, because then it familiarized ourselves with the area, familiarized ourselves with what it looked like, what it was going to feel like, a little bit of kind of like, right, there's the rock, there's where you're transitioning into the bike. From the bike, there's where you transition, and these are the run route. We actually went and did the run. I think we did the 10K loop. So we did, part of the way that Tenby works is you do 4 loops of a 10K run, which is 5K up, literally straight up a hill, which is gross, and then turn at the top and then come all the way back down. So we did one 5K up, one 5K down, and that I think took us just under an hour. Really slow pace. Me and Becca just running it like quite lazily, which gave me a lot more confidence as well to think about the idea of like, right, what the route's like, that you can do it in roughly the time that you're going to need to, actually a little bit quicker, and I'll talk about that in a minute of what happened on the day, but that's kind of what it looked like. So yeah, it was gaining more and more confidence. As I said, I would highly recommend, if you're going to do any of these types of races and you can go and do a recce or go and look round or just go and get familiarity of where you're going to be, I would highly recommend doing it. So that, I'll put up some pictures of that here. That was kind of what we did there. Then again, continued cycles with my dad, continued more brick training, went into more like the harder and aggressive processes all the way up until June. So that was kind of March, January, February, March, April, May. That was kind of when we did those sort of stuff in terms of the practice ones, and then also a little bit going into the obviously Tenby. Then June the 11th, just looking at stamp dates on here, I hope it was June the 11th, is when I did Staffordshire Ironman. So I'll put the first picture of me grinning like an absolute lunatic. So the way Staffordshire works is, obviously it's a shorter distance, so it's 1.9K in a lake. It's actually 3.6K. I made a mistake earlier. It's 3.6K for the full distance, not 2.4. I think it's 2.4 miles off the top of my head. I can't remember. But yeah, anyway, 1.9K into like a lake. I'll put up some pictures of the starter buoy here, because I've got them on my phone here. You then, from that lake, transition straight out into like a tented area. I'll put up a picture of me just getting changed as well, or a video actually of me getting changed, because that sort of makes sense. Then obviously you jump on the bike and you do a 90K loop on the bike, and then from there you come back in at a completely separate area and then go in. So I'll give you a bit of a funny story, and again, this comes down to why you should do a few of these races before you do the main event, because experience does matter. We turned up to Staffordshire the day of the race, the day before the race. You have to have everything checked in the day before. So you have to have your bike checked in, your shoes, all your running stuff, all of your stuff to do the event. You have to all checked in before the day. We were almost not able to do that race. And this again comes down to experience. So we didn't realize how much of a distance there was from where you drop your bike off, where you drop your running stuff off to where you drop your bike off. And we almost got to the point, and we were super stressed the day before. Loads of panic, after kind of swearing and doing all sorts of stuff. And obviously that didn't help the performance the next day, because if you're stressed and you're going into it, it's not great. Also, what I ended up doing was like missing where I should have put my nutrition on the bike, and then having to do that in the morning, which is just faff. Whereas obviously if you kind of spent a few days there before, you could have done all that and not been, panicked. So I would highly recommend, if you're going to do any of these events, if you can go down a couple of nights before, lay everything out, get everything checked in, get yourself all sorted, and then you're not going to be stressed for the day after. So I had quite a good performance on the day of Staffordshire. So obviously I finished the race, which was great. Obviously that's the first medal I got of the year for Ironman events. That honestly was great fun. Like, honestly, I really enjoyed 70.3. Like, it was so much fun. The lake swim, I think I did it in around 33 minutes or something like that off the top of my head. I actually PB'd my bike time on the bike, so I did it in like just under 3 hours, I think, off the top of my head. And then I think I did the half marathon in about 2.5 hours, including like transition, everything like that. So I think it was like a 6, close to 7 hour. I can't remember. I'll get the official time or somewhere. Which is actually, honestly, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Like, so much fun. All the pictures I'm smiling in. Give a bit of a like a, come back to the whole reason for doing an Ironman or doing anything in the first place. There's a really key point where there was a guy in a full RAF suit cycled past me, had a little bit of a chat with him, and I can really vividly remember thinking about like, the whole reason you're doing this is kind of like, raise money for cancer research, but also as well, like, proving, to Dennis, proving to everyone, like kind of like really to be able to, initially put into that place. So that was really interesting, actually. Like, I just really enjoyed the race. A couple of mistakes we definitely made, and again, this is why you should do these types of events before going into the full hog. I didn't have the right race belt. I didn't have, as I said, didn't get there early enough. There were a couple of things that I didn't set up properly on the bike, which then annoyed me all day. My timer chip and everything like that all ran out. So halfway through, I didn't even know what time I was doing, which is obviously a nightmare. I had to change watches with Becca. So when I went into the run, I could actually do it properly and know what I was doing. It was about 22 degrees, I think, as well. It was like the hottest day in the UK at the time, which was absolutely fucking gross. So I remember that being absolutely sweltering. And one thing I definitely would say, which is great about these events, and if you've never done one, I would highly recommend doing one, but also is like the camaraderie from all the people, like all the way around. And I'll put the video up somewhere of me like smiling like a Cheshire cat in a minute. But all the way around, like people happy to speak to you, people are giving each other fuel. There's loads of people who are on the stands and they're constantly talking to each other, constantly cheering you on, which is absolutely brilliant. So I found Staffordshire, it was difficult. Like the run part was really difficult. So by the time you come off a 90k bike ride and a 1.9k swim, obviously pretty knackered, and then coming into a run, it was quite difficult to maintain like a normal pace. A lot of walk, run, walk, run, walk, run. Now, I would actually argue that most Ironmans have finished that way anyway. You're not trying to PB your half Ironman or marathon time. You're not trying to PB your half marathon or marathon time at the end of that. You're just trying to get through it, really. So that kind of taught me a lot of lessons of like, right, this is kind of where you need to be at. This is what you need to be doing. When it does come to Wales, these are the kind of processes you want changed and adapt for when you go into that race. So whether that's the fueling, some of the bike setup, some of the way that we were setting up the running, all that type of stuff was a little bit different. You do die no matter what. After that, you're going to feel dead. So it kind of like puts you in a bit of like, oh, could I do double that distance? But I'll touch upon that in a second when it comes to it. Anyway, between kind of Staffordshire and Wales, it was a lot of, again, just going back into more maintainable races, testing limits, testing what that looked like, getting more and more like 100k or 120k rides out, which was a big thing I put a lot of focus on, is being able to do the cycle, because obviously I hadn't put loads of experience in cycling before. I mean, I've never cycled 112 miles, so it's kind of like, right, we're going to see how this goes. So there's a lot of time spent, getting back into the bike, really pushing those out, really trying to hammer that out on that side. Now, this sort of, as I said at the start of this video, like all of this sort of coincided with us moving house, which was a bit panicked. And to be honest, if I would have changed it, wouldn't have been the time of doing this. Now, you can kind of imagine dealing with the stress of wanting to move house and the training volume and all the solicitors and stuff. Like they say something like moving house is one of the stressful things you ever do in your life. Well, you can imagine trying to move house and sort out solicitors while training for one of the hardest distance races on the fucking planet. So it's pretty funny actually when you think about it. But anyway, yeah. So I'm not gonna lie, some of the training like intensity, some of the training consistency, also just general fatigue. Like, by this point you think so. From what would that be? That would have been bloody hell, like January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. So 9 months consistently cycling, running, swimming. You are pretty sick of it. Now, obviously, you're right at the end of that ability of like pushing yourself to do it. So, as I say, I would recommend, if you're going to do this, give yourself enough time in between everything and recovery and etc. to be able to actually stay inspired. I follow Joe Skipper quite a lot. Now, Joe Skipper like smashed Ironman Wales back in 2022, so he literally won it with some mad time. He's also, I think, is it sub 6 or sub 7? I think off the top of my head, I can't remember off the top of my head, but he did a really insane like PB event, which was a crazy thing where it's similar to like the night running marathon event where it's really streamlined. But anyway, I watched a lot of this stuff in between that to try and keep me up in that. And then what we then did do, and I would recommend doing similar things like this, just to give yourself confidence. I went and did my own self-run Ironman. Now, I know that sounds absolutely balmy. I did it over 48 hours. So what we did was do a full distance 3.8k swim, 3.8k swim. So by this point, in the year, I'd started to do full distance swims pretty consistently. I think the PB time that I got was an hour and 20 minutes, was the quickest I'd done, consecutively in a pool, just smashing out. I worked it out at the time with some, 100 and something lengths in one go you needed to do, and then that would give it you on the Apple Watch. But anyway, went down to the pool on well, it looks like here would have been August, I can't remember the date, but August, and did a 3.8k swim, full distance, which is the full distance we'll do. And then across 2 days, did the full length for the bike. So 100, the full 112 miles, but did it over 2 days, if that makes sense. So full distance swim into the first bike, which was, no, actually what we would have done is, no, yeah, that makes sense. So full distance swim, and then we did a 42, 47, 43, and a 46. I think slightly more bike ride in like blocks. And what I was doing in between is basically just checking with my dad, restocking fuel, restocking water, doing what I needed to do, and then did a marathon. And with the marathon, what we did on that, as you say, split between that sort of week, or that sort of 40-hour period, sorry, basically just had it so that we did a 2.1k swim, a 2.1k run, came back, had some food, had some fuel, and then came back, and then like literally 5-10 minutes worth of like refueling, checked I was still alive, and then did the same loop again, but just did it backwards. So then it was a little bit more less fatigue. You will find as you get further and further into this, you manage mentally, like when you're doing, that's when you look at that there, that was like 8 hours worth of time on a bike spread over that period. But also then looking at like 21k, 2 21k runs, and also 3.8k swim, you start to mentally manage certain things. So like, for instance, in the pool, I would start to like just think about stuff. You'd have thoughts playing through your mind, you have ideas, you have things that you can, do in that area. But then when it came to the bike, what I did was bought a set of over-ear headphones that are based on like vibration. They're not based on sound. So what you can then do is listen to podcasts on the bike ride, which is obviously absolutely brilliant. And then on running, like what I would do is I would have my dad cycle alongside me, keep some entertainment. It just adds that sort of up. I know Joe Skipper does a very similar thing. I'm not trying to be Joe Skipper. I'm probably not going to do another Ironman event, to be honest. It was just a one and done for me. But I think if you're looking at what those guys are doing to kind of keep themselves entertained during that period, it makes sense. So yeah, August did a self-run Ironman spread over like, I think it was 40 hours off the top of my head, or it might have been a week. Don't quote me on that. Just to kind of test the volume of like, right, we're in August, we've got a month left to go. Can you handle the volume, even if it's in 40-hour period? The fatigue, the general consensus of that, really. So yeah, did manage to, and did get it at that point. One of the biggest things that was giving me quite a lot of confidence before going into the race is my swim times were good, and also my cycling ability over that 9-month period had massively improved from, way back not being able to manage it to like the RPMs, the reps, understanding it was obviously absolutely huge. That was massive. I'll give a big shout out to James Blanchard, who's obviously the guy who coached me around all that, FTP tests, everything like that. Anyway, we come into now. So it's like, 40 minutes into this so far? We come into now, which was all the way down in Wales. I'll show you a picture of the night before of all of the fuel. I'll bring this up on screen somewhere. So it's like laying out all the fuel, laying out everything. We didn't make the same mistake as Staffordshire. We went down like, I think 3 days early, before the actual day of the event. So we had like 3 consecutive nights. Then the actual day of it, even that, to be fair, wasn't enough time. I'll come on to why in a second, but still, it meant that we could get down, even like set everything up, drop everything off, get everything really clear about what we're going to do on the day. We actually went down, even had like a meal and a beer, then I think two nights before maybe, or something, doing it. Just to get me as calm as physically possible before actually doing the race, which is actually quite funny to think about it. But I wouldn't necessarily advise doing that, but I would say like, maybe try and get yourself in a good headspace and just relax. If you've done the work up until that point and you've done the volume, you've done enough of the training, you've done as much as you possibly can to understand that it's an endurance event, race. You're not going for a sprint, Jesus, and unless you are, maybe you are going for a time, but to actually understand that when you come to that race, you want to try and relax as much as possible. You should have done all the work beforehand to then be in that position to get on the start line and actually pass it. So yeah, that was kind of the night before. My mum and dad were there, which was a huge factor. Like, as I said in this, my dad has done a lot of the training with me. So is Becca, and my mum's obviously seen it as well because I've been coming home and eating all her food. So yeah, that's been absolutely brilliant to obviously have those guys there on the start line, which was absolutely fantastic. I'll show a picture of me right before on the kind of start line here. I'll bring that up somewhere on the screen now. So that was, right before, stood in the thing, actually bicep and triceps looking pretty beastly there. But anyway, you have pink bags. So before we go through, in fact, no, what we'll go into is the night before the race. So night before the race, I guarantee if you're going to do these types of events, first time doing it, you're probably not going to fucking sleep. I pretty much guarantee that because one, you're going to have to wake up at probably 2/3 in the morning just to get down there because the race obviously starts at 6, or 6 or 7. But I think you have to actually be there by 6. Plus, you've got to get a fuel in. Plus, there's a lot of adrenaline the night before. Plus, just in general, there's you might need to make adjustments to the bike, put your fuel in, do your water bowls, whatever you need to do to make sure everything's good to go. So, long story short, like you don't really sleep the night before. That's hence why my eyes are fucked. Now, what I actually used in the morning, and I'll play a tiny bit of this and try not to cry. But this. So, as you can see back there, obviously having previously being in the Royal Marines, but also like Winston Churchill, and obviously the affiliates towards Dennis, and obviously like everything that he had done and achieved his career. The night before you go into this type of race, you are gonna fucking shit yourself. Like I don't really care who you are, I don't care what you've maybe achieved before, what you've done. If it's the first time you're going into doing a 3.8 swim in the sea, right? 112 miles and then a marathon. If you're trying to achieve something like that, I mean, if you work it out, it's something ridiculous. Like I think we worked out the other day. It's 180 plus 42 plus 3.8. So it's 225.8 kilometers and some, because the transitions in between, you also include that, you're going to cover in the space of less than 17 hours, right? Is what you need to do it in, right? So if you're going to go into that and you're not, if it's the first time you're doing it, you're probably going to shit yourself. And now, one of the biggest things that I've done quite a lot of research on, it's one of the biggest things that helped me pass out of the military. It's one of the biggest things that helped me build business. One of the biggest things that helped me do a lot of things is you're going to need more than one why. You're going to need successive strong things of reasons you're doing it. If you're trying to do something because it's a surface level reason, I'm more than likely it's going to fuck up and you're not going to do it. So one of the biggest reasons why is like the night before, I got really fucking clear in my head, like the wars that Dennis had been in, Second World War, that he put so much effort into that and massively helped out. There were men in that war that like realistically gave their lives for our country. Like, so the mindset you need to get yourself in the night before is to be really embedded for more reasons why than just self-achievement. So one of the biggest things I wanted to do is inspire other men. I wanted to prove myself right. I wanted to help my granddad, be proud of me. Hopefully he is. And also as well, like really, really dive deeply into like, I've been in some fucking shit situations, since leaving the military, and some really crap things. And actually, it's an embodiment of coming out the other end. I wanted to prove my family right. I wanted to prove actually Ollie, who made a really good video, which I'll put up somewhere here, saying good luck for the race. I wanted to prove those guys right. I wanted to be an inspiration for quite a lot of people. So I had about 6 or 7 reasons, and one of the biggest things I did the night before and the morning of is really hone into those before even getting anywhere near the start line. You're going to need to do that because there's going to be points of the race where you're like, I could just can this all in, I could just chin this off. And I'll talk about that in a minute, because there definitely were points on the day where I was thinking, fuck this. You're going to need to go into that type of headspace. You're going to need to go deep into what you need to achieve and what you need to do and the reason why. The reality being is that like if you're just doing it for some surface level reason, as soon as it gets hard, you'll just chit it in. You'll just go, yeah, what was the fucking point? So that's one thing I've used personally. You might not be that type of person. You might not need to do that. You might just be like one leg in front of the other, one pedal stroke, one breaststroke, one swim stroke, or one front cool stroke. But like for me, reality being is like to achieve this, I needed to go somewhere in my mind that I was like, this is not just for you, Alex. This is a bigger reason why. Anyway. So coming on to that, as I said, spent a few days down there. I'll bring up some pictures on the screen now. So some really good bits of like me and Becca literally just walking around the track, getting embodied. You kind of just really soak up the atmosphere a few days before going into the actual race and actually day, as I say, prepped all the kit. And that was me then on the start line. So going down to that route is like, right, you're here. So with Wales, the way it works is there is a beach swim you drop your pink bag off. So the pink bag you're holding has your running transition shoes, and I'll come into what I mean by that in a minute. The way that it works is you have to swim the distance. You have to then, from there, run up the beach, put these like pink bag shoes on, and I think it's about a kilometer from the beach to the transition to get on the bike, which is obviously fucking mental when you consider you're about to go and do 180k on a bike as well. That little extra case, it doesn't seem like a lot when you think about it, but it is a fucking lot when you think I've just done, an hour and a half worth of swimming. But yes, that's one of the things. And then you go into the two loops, and then you go into four loops. A segmentation as well is one big thing that I think you should utilize in any of these types of events, is like work out the segments of it. So I think on the full distance, there is a 100k loop and an 80k loop. So in my mind, it's like once you've done 100, you're ticking off the 80. With the runs, it's like those four segments. Anyway, long story short, we went into the swim. The sea was a gift, absolute gift. So it was a really calm sea. Was absolutely brilliant. Like I'll put up some pictures here or videos here somewhere on the screen. Really, really like flat, like brilliant. And you look at what it was the year before or last year, and it was really choppy, really grim. People getting pulled out of it. People not getting anywhere near the times that they wanted. So it was actually really lucky. I think I looked at the sea and thought, oh my God, if you're going to do this, this is probably going to be one of the perfect, opportunities to actually have a really good crack at making this happen. So anyway, yeah, long story short, they had a fantastic display beforehand from the RF, which actually you can imagine, based upon everything I touched upon and the reason why I did the race in the first place, really kind of provoked this whole idea of you can fucking do this, Alex. This is more than possible for you to be able to achieve this. Dennis is looking at you. There's a lot of twig points. So I was thinking the whole point of this was about, my granddad, about really trying to prove something to him and prove something to, what I was going to sort of kick off into. But anyway, long story short, I was like, oh my God, you get butterflies beforehand. You're speaking to a couple of guys in the queue. I remember speaking to one lad, and bless him, because I think he did it in 15 hours. And I was quite a bit over that, but we'll touch on that in a minute. But I remember talking to him, oh yeah, I'm going for 15 or this and the other end. You sort of stood with these guys thinking we might be here around together. And gun went off. Obviously, the professional athletes go off. That's what happens on all these races. Pro athletes will go off first. And then obviously you get into your normal swim time. Now, what I didn't actually realize, and I'll come to a point later on in the debrief of the whole race, is that your start time isn't the 7 o'clock. Your start time is the moment that your foot crosses the line to go and get in the sea, is then what you've got 17 hours from that point to then, finish. And that coincides with the bike cut off. That coincides with the run cut off. That coincides with everything, really. So I don't know why. Maybe it was just, fatigue. Maybe it was just, your head, you woke up really early. You're not really with it. I kind of got it into my head that it was 7 o'clock until, that time that you cut off. So the bike cut off is 10 and a half hours. You've got 10 and a half hours to do the swim and the bike together. If not, they won't let you run because you technically might not have enough time to finish the run, and there's no point. And it's dangerous as well, because if you've got a load of people that are 13 hours in and then they go on the run, it's just chaos. So they cut the time off at 10 and a half hours. But anyway, got into the swim, absolutely enjoyed it. The way that Wales work is you have what's called an Aussie beach run. So you do a 1.9k swim, you run along the beach, and you do another 1.9k swim, and then you run up. So the first lap, literally as soon as I jumped in, as I sort of alluded to earlier with what Scott Booth told me, absolute legend, straight in, dove in, head was here, head was here, jellyfish was here. Was looking at this jellyfish oh my fucking God. And then you kind of start thinking about all this stuff though. You're like, I remember Scott talking about that back in January. So it's really brilliant actually, because I was nowhere near it, so I didn't get stung or anything, but you kind of go into it, you're like, oh, that's brilliant. But yeah, got to the first buoy, turned at the first buoy, and then you obviously look at the rest of the buoys and then go into it. The first lap, I felt great. I felt really, really good. Was calm. Was you look, you're doing all right. I had a watch on, so I looked up at the watch as I got out. It was 40 minutes or 41 minutes. I was fucking hell, this is not too bad here. I'm doing all right. I'm on for a good time. And then I just spat it was not sick, but it was where you've swallowed all this salt water, spat everything out in this massive puddle as I was sort of getting out, and then just felt really queasy and not great. Nothing like when I finished the 1.9k in Staffordshire. 1.9k in Staffordshire, got out, felt fantastic. It was it was brilliant. Anyway, came in to do the second lap and wasn't sick, but you spew up this salt water. Jumped into the next one, and then once I was back in the water, I felt all right again. But up to that point, I felt oh God, this is gross. again, like I said, segmentation, you kind of go, okay, I know I've only got 1.9K swim left, and I'm out and I'm on the bike. And the bike, it's more manageable, it's a bit more nicer. You've got freedom, you can eat, your hands are there. So you're thinking in your head, like, once I get out of this water, I'm going to be onto the bike here. So yeah, did the swim. I actually quite enjoyed that segment of it. Got out of there, did the little loop. I did get into the tent, and one thing I would say is one thing I did not practice, and I would highly recommend if you're going to do any event like an Ironman or anything similar, is the actual transition. So I didn't really practice where would my bottles be, where would my shoes be. So got into the tent, ditched my wetsuit off, and it was just a fucking scramble of stuff everywhere. I wasted so much time taking a piss. I probably should have just, realistically done what everyone does, is piss themselves. And then what I should have also done is I took on food at that point. I kind of stopped and ate. I should have just done that on the bike, because I would have saved probably 10, 15 minutes, literally just a wasted opportunity time in there. Just thinking, oh, I've got, I've got a whole day ahead of me. It's fine. Whereas actually you do need to be a little bit quicker and a little bit more hastened from those points. But, it swings around of us, I suppose. I passed the race. So at the end of the day, whatever we did worked. Anyway, long story short, got into the first bike lap, was yeah, this is not too bad, feeling good. I had technically three methods of knowing the distance and three methods of knowing the time technically. So I had my watch on, which was my Sunto. So I had my Sunto on, which was just showing right, I've got a rough, I reset it after the swim and was right, I know I'm on the bike. I had a bike computer that I'd recently purchased and bought, hadn't really done enough training or with it. So then set that up and got that off just in case one of those fails. So I had 2 points of failure. And then started off on the bike. Now, one of the biggest things, again, I said I failed with, is that I also then was trying to use the time of the day to average out whether or not I'd hit the 10.5 hour mark to then be able to cut in. So one thing I would say is I would recommend having a fail-safe on your bike that you sort of one on your bike that you look at constantly, potentially a fail-safe on your watch, and ignore everything else, because otherwise it can get quite complicated. And what I actually ended up doing, which was a massive failure from my point, is I looked up at when I got to about 90K, really enjoyed the bike ride for the first point. As you come down into all of it, it's really, really I'll put up a picture somewhere here of the route of what you do, obviously 112 miles. But really enjoyed it. There were parts that were really good fun. There were some fucking massive hills, really underestimated hills. But long story short, did the first lap, and I really, really thought that I was, oh, I'm fine, I'm all good. Got off even at one point and took a piss. Really just taking it oh, I'm fine here. I've got loads of time. Now, what then happened is that I kind of switched, and I was looking at my watch and thinking, oh my God, I've, fucked this up here. How am I only at this point, or how am I only here? And basically what ended up happening is as I said, because I had so many points of what I was trying to track the route with, I didn't realize that actually the time that I'd started was nowhere near 7 o'clock. It was probably 7:30 or even 8 o'clock. So I actually was massively in the time, but I was starting to convince myself that I wasn't. So I was starting to go around psychological in my head, over the halfway point, and think, oh, I've done the first 90K in 4 hours. Oh my God, I've only got, 3 hours and 30 minutes to finish this, or something based upon the cutoff. But anyway, long story short, that wasn't actually true. But what then happens is, obviously, as you get fucking further and further into a bike ride that's 112 miles, you start to get some psychological issues. So there was a lot of stuff going around my head. There was a lot of points where I was on some of the hills and I was just standing up and just stamping to get the bike to move, and it just fell apart at some points off the back of that, to be totally honest with you. Anyway, long story short though, we kept the pedal strokes going, we kept the things going in that place, we kept the movements in. And what then kind of happened is gradually you start to chip away, and you start to think, oh, I've got a chance here, I've got an ability. Some of the hills on Wales are fucking mental. They're 17 point, 24% gradients. Some of them are absolutely crazy. I definitely didn't put enough, looking back, there's a lot of hills that we've been training on, but maybe not to that extent after you're at that distance and under that level of fatigue. So one of the biggest things I probably messed up on is that as an idea. Yeah, that was kind of what would happen with that. But anyway, we got most of the bike leg, it wasn't too bad. There were parts of it that I hated, as I said, and really psychological processes sit in. But once you're about 9 hours into the race, which is mad when you think 9 hours it's a long time to just do anything, let alone be fucking on a bike and swimming. But once you're about 9 hours into the race, you kind of end up quite like on your own, just because a lot of the pack is separated. It's all, it's all distributed. It's all off. Some of the crowd have dispersed, and obviously you're kind of just at that point. And luckily, like we made the cutoff basically. So that was at the point where it's like, right, we're into the cutoff. I'll put some pictures up here of Becca filming on the bike. Now, I'd really, as I said, like massively convinced myself that I hadn't, I was miles off it. And I'll show this little video. And bless Becca and my mum and my dad. Basically, long story short, they like in Staffordshire, Becca was used to me smiling. She was used to me being like, "Oh, this is so enjoyable. This is great." I'd finished the bike ride and I said, because it was so mentally draining of like not knowing where I was going to make it. Should I even bother? Should I just get off? Should I just can this in? Oh my God, I let all these people down. Blah, as well as also you're kind of subconsciously and consciously thinking, well, if I am going to make it, I need to fucking take fuel on here, mate, because you're about to try and complete a marathon at the end of this. So I just like let out this massive sigh of relief as I came into the bike point, and there was no one who'd stop me, going. They were like, "Yeah, look, you've got plenty of time." I think I was actually around 30 to 40 minutes off the top of my head into the cutoff. So I had 30 or 40 minutes left to be able to. So I was completely fine. I probably actually wasted a lot of time and energy, and ultimately actually could have been, an hour into the cutoff if I'd not done certain things. I would have definitely have done different next time, such as get off and take a piss, such as just, maybe wasted some energy, such as doled about when I should have actually just bombed it for the first, 100K. But anyway, long story short, we then got into the actual run part, and I was like, oh my God, like I'm actually going to stand a chance of doing this. Saw Becca on the sideline. I'm really like annoyed there is actually no like video of this or anything. I think there might be somewhere, so I'll try and pull up and find it, of me just fucking bawling my eyes out, just cried, literally first like whatever it is, 2K or 1K of the run. I like saw them and just bawled my eyes out for about 10 seconds or something, literally just to go and see Becca and then give her a kiss and then carry on running. And then from there, it was like, right, we've got to fucking do this now. So what I ended up doing, and partly based on fatigue, partly based on stress and all that sort of stuff, and realistically as well, like as I said, off the back of the house, maybe training had dropped. When we got into the first lap, it was a case of like, right, let's just see what this first lap looks like. And then if we can repeat that a few times, when it does eventually come to the finish, if you're in the time, you're in the time. So the overall focus that I'd gone for originally was like a 15-hour, full distance, right? And then eventually I was like, right, let's just go for the finish. Let's just go for fucking finish. I do not care what the time is. I don't care what it is. As long as I can get the medal on the board, I don't give a shit. So long story short, went into the first lap, and I probably did, I think it was like an hour and a half or something. I probably had like 6 hours, 6.5, 7 hours to do the marathon, something similar to that off the top of my head. And it was like an hour and 20, an hour and a half to do 10K. And that's quite a long time when you consider like normal average pace is probably an hour. Like that's quite slow, but still like an hour is like up and down those hills, because it is a vertical hill into a massive drop down to the bottom of it. Anyway, so I really was like confused, like, right, am I even anywhere near the cutoff? I'm going to make the cutoff for the run now, let alone we just finished the bike. Bloody hell, this is crazy. Bless my mum. At some point, she was like, "Oh, you can just stop now, surely." And it was like, "No." And Becca's like, "No, you definitely fucking can't. Like, keep it bloody going." But anyway, long story short, did the first lap, was like, "Yep, you're in time." And then what started to happen, which was brilliant, and it is a great spectators race, Tenby, because the way that the course is laid out, it's very spectator friendly in terms of they can go and see the people who are doing the race, they can see the athletes. Obviously, it's a fucking long day, so you want to be keeping and cheering them up. So what was happening is at key points of the run, I knew where people would be and they could give me splits. So on the app, on the Ironman app, you can literally see this person's this time they're going to finish. This time they're going to finish. So at each point, my dad was going, yeah, you're in for this time, you're in for this time, you're in for, you've actually chipped off the predicted finish time that you've got. So I think at one point it was something mad. It was like 16 hours and 45 minutes. And it was like, oh, okay, that's really cutting it fine. Bearing in mind, you probably got 2 laps, like 20, half marathon left. Whereas I think at one point it got massively down. I'll talk about the finish time in a minute. But anyway, you kind of get into a rhythm of it. You get into like knowing what it looks like. So, right, okay, if I know that time is for this lap, I know that if I can walk this particular bit, I'm probably better off to run this bit. I'm better off to run that bit. Anyway, once you get to, so the way that Tenby works is you get bands, and these are the 4 bands that are up here. So you get bands, or like each lap that you do of the 10K, you collect a different color band, and then you go down. So it's really funny because like what you'll obviously see is you're running on the same route as everybody, but you'll look around and you'll be like, oh, they've got three, or like you might see someone else, you might have two and someone else has got one. It becomes this kind of like funny culture of like, oh, how many laps are you on, mate? Oh, he's got three bands there. Fucking hell, he's about to finish. But anyway, it was like kind of weeded out to the point where like it was just the guys who were like, right, we're quite late into this. We're probably going to be in between 16 and 17 hours to finish, which is 17:01, you don't, 17:01, you don't. So you need to be bang on under 17 to actually call yourself an Ironman. You can't finish, over that time frame. So anyway, long story short, I was getting the key times. I was like, I know what I'm in. I was taking on plenty of fuel. And one of the really, really good guys, Ryan, I'll put like Ryan's picture up somewhere here. He's actually hopefully going to do 2024 race, which I'll be there supporting for as well. Definitely, mate, because you're a key part into this. Was constantly giving me times, being like, "This is great. What you're doing is great. Just keep whatever you're doing." I was kind of doing this thing called a commando shuffle, which is like not a walk, not a jog, but it's kind of just like moving yourself forward. So there are points of running the downhills, points of doing the uphills, like just generally getting yourself into it. So I came to like the last lap, and I was like, "Oh my fucking god! Like I'm genuinely going to do this." Like, I think once you kind of know, you kind of like at these points of just knowing, like, okay, I've done all this work to get to this. You literally just need to finish. So when you know it's the last 10K, although you've done, like we said there, how many miles, 215 kilometers or whatever it is, even at the last 10K, you're thinking, you literally like something stirs up inside of you. I remember like really thinking, oh, fucking hell, mate, I'm actually going to do this. Like, I'm actually, this guy is, 9 months ago could barely even swim, is going to complete an Ironman. Like, it's crazy, man. It's actually a bit crazy to even think about now, to be totally honest with you. But like, yeah, so you get to that last 10K and you're like, oh my fucking god, I'm going to go and get that last band. Like, I'm going to go and get it. Becca, my mum, my dad, like they saw me on that lock and they were like, oh my god, like, just we'll see you in 5K's time or whatever it is. I remember like kind of getting to those points and you kind of like realize it. You're like, oh my god, I'm going to do it. You get up to the top, which is the top of the 5K, and they go to hand you a band, and it's optional if you want them, because if not, you just keep tracking yourself. I remember the guy, I think it was blue, off the top of my head, the guy saying, oh, do you want the blue band? And it was like, hell yeah, I fucking want the blue band, mate. I want all four of these fucking bastards. I remember getting that and then being like, right, you're on your way down here. And I remember like on some of the laps, I didn't run all of the downhill, the parts that, your feet are just fucked by this point. There are parts where I was still walking. On that last 5K, I ran the whole way down. I was like, there's no way that I'm going to get it to the point where like it's so close that it's, you might even not, because you could fuck up one point of it. You might be, oh, it's 16:55 or something, and you've got to cover 2K in 5 minutes. Obviously, didn't really want to do that. 2K in 5 minutes would be ridiculous, by the way, anyway. But like, yeah, so I remember like just letting my legs fully go and being like, right, just bloody make it to the end of this thing, man. Now, it's dark by this point. You're incredibly fatigued. You've not really had any proper food. You had lots of gels, lots of whatever. And I remember like one of the biggest things one of the guys said to me on one of the laps is like, he'd finished one already. And he was like, so I was like, what does it feel like to finish? We were walking at this point. We were going up, one to steep hills, and we were like walking at this point. I was like, what's it like to finish? And he was like, I'm not very religious, and I've never, obviously died, but I can imagine when you finish your first Ironman, that is probably going to be what it's like to die, because it's this awe-standing moment. You've achieved something pretty epic. There's all these bright lights, all these people cheering at you, and you're thinking, oh my god. So I remember coming up the red carpet, and it was really funny because there's a beginner bell that you ring if it's your first ever one and you've accomplished it. And it was actually broke. It was really funny because obviously the ring part had like fallen off. So I remember picking it up and like smashing it into the bell, because I was like, I'm gonna ring that bell for sure. I'm not doing another one of these fucking bastards. Well, I might do another one at some point, but like I'm not doing another one of these bastards and not ring the bell. Anyway, looked up the board and it was like 16:24 or something like that. So I look at the race time here. I did it 16:24 and 54 seconds, which is under 17 hours, which overall, like I said, that's all I wanted to do. At the end of the day, like I just wanted to be able to finish one, which is absolutely awesome. So I remember like high-fiving a few people along the line, looking up and seeing that, like, the gates that you're obviously seeing, it's all bright up, and being like, yeah, mate, it's pretty fucking all-standing. Walking through it and feeling like, it's really weird, because I thought you'd feel like this mad sense of relief and this mad sense of craziness, but realistically, you just feel like, I'm just glad I finished. So you're obviously like, yeah, it's that point, glad you're finished. And then from there, like Becca, bless her, and my mum and dad were like stood on the other side, and I could barely even like talk. I was like, you're so knackered, but also the other side of it, like just generally, you're so like gobstruck that the day's over. You've been up since whatever it's 3 in the morning. You've done a full 3.8K swim. You've done a 180K bike ride. And you've done a 42K, distance on your feet, whether it's a run or walk or whatever you've ended up doing. Realistically, it's a long fucking way. I remember like finishing and being like, oh my God. And then what you then do is you go into the tent where you collect your medal. And obviously I've got my medal pinned up in here. I'll put a picture of it up somewhere. So, you get a medal. And then from there, you obviously go into like a pizza sort of tent and you sit there for a little bit. I remember like I took like 2 or 3 slices of pizza, went and sat outside on this thing, sat down and just like, you're just gone. Now, I kind of know what fatigue is from obviously my military career of like when you do like some massive yomps and you do 30 milers and like you finish and you just feel this really weird sense of like you're really awake, because you've obviously just done all this distance. Your blood is really pumping, your head's like on, you smashed so much caffeine, you're really awake, but you're also really tired. It's like ridiculous. But I remember being sat there and just thinking to myself, like, mate, you've actually done it. Like, you've actually genuinely done that. And it was really crazy. And then obviously, like, I'll bring up this picture now just in case for some reason I can't get it on the screen. But like, yeah, and then this was like my finisher photo, which to be fair, I'm pretty fucking happy with that when you consider it's like arms raised. It's like, thank God I've done it. I am pretty sure, if you zoom in on my face, I'm pretty sure I'm crying at that point. Let me have a quick look. Yeah, that's me like halfway into like crying, looking absolutely massive. But yeah, I remember being like, oh my God, this is crazy. So yeah, anyway, finished. And then the next day I could barely walk for like 2, 3 days. Luckily, and I probably would recommend if you're going to do this, definitely setting this up. We had a holiday booked the week after. We actually moved into our new house. So Ironman event was on the 3rd. I picked up the keys and moved into a new house on the 4th, which you can imagine, like normally people move into a new house and they're like, oh yeah, great. I was like, nah, fuck this. Just moved in, got the keys and threw everything in. So that was really funny. I'm really glad I've done this, and a few reasons being because I wasn't going to do it. I was going to just be like, oh, I'll just leave it, and eventually I'll come around to maybe talking about it. But like, what I would recommend is a couple of things. If you're going to do an Ironman or you're going to do your own big event, now it doesn't just have to be an Ironman. It could be a marathon. It could be your first 10K. It could be your first 5K. It could be whatever you want to do, dude. Like, or female, whoever you are, whatever you're trying to achieve. One thing I would say is if you're going to pick a target that you want to achieve, a few piece of advice from me personally, have a big why. Like have a few big whys actually of why you want to do it. Like, if you're trying to achieve something, it's not just for you, it's the inspiration for your kids, it's your family. It's hopefully this has inspired some people, some lads out there. Like I've gone through some pretty shitty mental health problems. I've gone through arrests. I've gone through, some major issues that I've dealt with. And like, to be able to come off the back of that, buy my own house, run my own business, and achieve this is pretty big. And it's not me boasting; it's like me saying, "Oh, I'm actually pretty surprised by myself," to be honest. So, I would say if you're going to do this, have a few whys is one of the key important things. But also on the back of that, from a logistical point of view, fucking plan shit, dude. Like hire a coach, whether that's something to specifically teach you exactly what to do. Whether that's a triathlon coach, whether that's an online coach, whether that's someone who's going to tell you exactly what you need to do for that event. It's going to massively help. I've had like 3 or 4 coaches, which talked about there in this journey, which is massive. My triathlon coach, my swim coach, and then also the guys that help the rehab, Aaron at Nuffield as well, has been a massive point as well. So I'd hire people to help you. It's not going to be achieved by a one-man team, really. That's the reality of it. But also what I would say is enjoy it. Like, there were points in that race where, like I say, it felt fucking shit. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. I've done this wrong. But then, like, there were also points that are just, like, ridiculously stupid in my mind that I think I'll remember forever. That are just really good fun. I think Staffordshire was way funner than Wales, but Wales is just gross. But anyway, massive thank you to everyone who supported me. I'll kind of read that out. So, like, Ollie and Dean, you lads are actually brilliant. Obviously all the business stuff. Drew, you played a massive part in this. James is in JB High Bar, you played a massive part in this. Dan, TMP, you played a massive part in the achievement of this. Scott Booth, obviously Becca, my partner, my mum, my dad, everyone there, like you've all played a huge part in this. And yeah, I'm glad I did this video because I probably would have put it off otherwise. And it's good to round off, what we were able to achieve with this year with like fitness abilities. What's next for me? Anyone who's curious, I'm now going into like more physique-based training and a photo shoot because I feel like that's like the way that I want to go. Endurance, I've kind of feel like I've ticked most of that off in terms of an ultramarathon and Ironman at 70.3, obviously my military career as well. So that's one of the biggest things. But yeah, right, guys, I am going to finish off here. I'll probably put some edits into this at some point as well. So any questions, anything you want to ask about, and it's probably, I'm not going to claim that I'm a triathlon coach. I'm not going to start prepping people for Ironmans. That's not what I'm about. That's what I do. But what I would say is, like, if you want any support, you want advice about picking your goals, picking your achievements, let us know. Peace out.